This is the Love Language Podcast with Abdul Ghaffar. Love Language. Conversations about love that ask more of you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Love Language. My name is Abdul Ghaffar Arikioyo. Thank you as usual for joining me. I want to use this opportunity to say a big thank you to everyone who has always sent me a message. Your encouragements are thrilling, they make a huge difference, and they keep me going all the time on the show. Welcome to Love Language again. It's another beautiful episode of the show, and today I want to talk to you about something, as usual, quite interesting and thrilling. Today we want to talk about communication breakdown, and this is something that happens in literally all relationships. When I say literally all relationships, and I mean literally all, there is one point or another in virtually all relationships that there is a form of misunderstanding due to lack of communication or ineffective communication or breakdown in communication. And also, there are certain times that you would figure out that in your relationship, you and your partner argue all the time about very little things. I'll call them insignificant things. These reasons or these arguments are as a result of breakdown in communication. So let's talk about the intriguing conversation today, which is about communication breakdown and ultimately why we argue about small things. So let's begin with a quiet scene that you may recognize. I'll give you an example. It's late in the evening. The room holds no obvious tension, yet calm as quietly withdrawn. One partner sits absorbed in a phone, scrolling with urgency and intention. The other partner stands at the sink, washing dishes with more force than the task requires. A question enters the space, carefully phrased yet emotionally charged. Why didn't you reply my message? The answer arrives quickly, sharp and defensive, carrying more than words suggest. Why do you always make a big deal out of nothing? Nothing escalates. No raised voices, no slammed doors, and yet something fractures. Moments like this rarely register as crises. They appear ordinary, forgettable even, but they matter because they reveal something deeper at work beneath the surface of everyday interaction. The arguments almost never begin with what they claim to be about. They begin with something else entirely. A late reply becomes a question of priority. A forgotten plan becomes a measure of care. A dismissive tone becomes evidence of emotional distance. Have you noticed how small incidents seem to carry disproportionate emotional weight? The issue is not the unanswered message, it's the meaning attached to it. Why does a missed text feel like rejection rather than inconvenience? Why does conversation about money trigger shame instead of collaboration? Why does silence injure more deeply than conflict itself? These reactions do not emerge in isolation. They grow in spaces where emotional connection has thinned, where reassurance feels scarce, and where being seen no longer feels guaranteed. In such spaces, partners stop responding to the present moment and begin reacting to accumulated absence. This is where loneliness quietly enters relationships. Loneliness does not always announce itself through isolation or abandonment. Often, it appears while two people still share a home, a bed, and a routine. It manifests in the scene that one's inner world no longer has a reliable witness. You speak, but you are not fully heard. You reach out, but the response arrives delayed, distracted, or defensive. So the argument is not really about the phone, the dishes, or the message. It's about the fear of becoming invincible to someone who once felt close. So let's talk about what this episode really focuses on. It invites you to a deeper inquiry. When conflict repeats itself in familiar patterns, what is it truly asking for? Are you engaging because love still seeks connection and repair? Or are you arguing because loneliness has taken root within the relationship? So stay with this conversation. It may unsettle you because this is a very familiar environment, but it may also give the language to an emotional reality you have felt but struggled to name. Again, if you're joining me for the first time, this is Love Language. My name is Abdul-Gafar Arikeoyo. Today, our focus is about communication breakdown, and we're looking at why individuals in relationships argue about small issues. So, consider this love story or this scenario not as an isolated case, but it's a composite drawn from many lived experiences. Like I told you earlier, my research area focuses on romantic relationships. So I have interviewed individuals in relationships, I have conducted surveys, experiments and the likes, and I have had people with lived experiences in relationships. So its power lies precisely in its familiarity. A couple in their mid-30s, both professionals, competent, articulate, and outwardly stable. There is no dramatic betrayals to point to, no clear moral transgressions, no obvious abuse. From the outside, their relationship appears functional, even enviable. A lot of people look and say, "Oh, I wish my relationship is like this. I wish our relationship could be like this." They meet responsibilities, they manage appearances, they survive the week. Yet, their evenings often end in conflict. The arguments feel repetitive, almost absurd in their predictability. One partner raises concerns about money, small expenses, budgeting decisions, perceived imbalance. The other responds by insisting the real issue is tone, respect, or how things are said rather than what is said. They circle familiar territory. Who contributes more? Who listens less? Who's always exhausted? Who carries the invincible load? These conversations do not resolve anything. Instead, they accumulate. Over time, affection becomes conditional rather than freely given. Touch reduces, not because desire disappears, but because emotional safety erodes. Conversations shorten, stripped of curiosity with warmth. Silence begins to expand, not the restful kind, but a heavy, watchful, quiet filled with unsaid thoughts. What is striking here is not what is happening. Each unresolved interaction deposits a small residue of disappointment. Over months, the residue hardens into distance. One night, after yet another argument about a modest household expense, one partner speaks quietly, without accusation or drama. "I feel alone even when you are here." That sentence changes everything. It cuts through the noise of surface conflict and exposes the deeper truth that had been hiding in plain sight. The problem was never really money. It was not tone. It was not even time or stress. Though those factors played their part, the core issue was emotional loneliness unfolding within shared life. This is an uncomfortable reality because it challenges common assumptions. We often associate loneliness with physical absence, with abandonment, with being single or isolated. Yet, emotional loneliness can thrive in proximity. It can exist between two people who sleep in the same bed, share responsibilities, and appear intact to the world. Have you ever felt emotionally abandoned while technically not alone? Have you ever realized that what you missed was not the presence, but attunement, not conversation, but being truly seen? This story matters because it names a quiet crisis many couples, many individuals in romantic relationships live with but rarely articulate. And once named, it demands attention. So, let's get to the place where we break down slowly and think carefully. Most couples do not argue about issues themselves. They argue about what those issues symbolize. Surface conflicts act as emotional placeholders. They carry meanings far heavier than the practical content. standing in for needs that feel too exposed, too risky, too unfamiliar to articulate directly. When arguments repeat, it is rarely because problems has not been explained clearly enough. It is because the deeper message has not been heard. So let us examine 4 of the most common hidden drivers behind what are often dismissed as small arguments. Number 1, money, the language of safety and value. When couples argue about money, they are mostly never arguing about numbers. Money functions as a psychological language. It speaks to security, anonymity, control, and personal worth. For one partner, spending may symbolize freedom, enjoyment, or reward. For the other, it may trigger anxiety shaped by earlier experiences of scarcity, responsibility, or instability. So when one partner says, "You're careless with money," the unspoken message may be, "I feel unsafe and I do not know how to relax." When the partner responds back as, "You are controlling," the deeper meaning may be, "I feel judged, constrained, and reduced." Notice how neither statement is truly the bank account. The argument unfolds around fear, not finance. Have you ever paused mid-conflict to ask yourself, what fear is speaking through you in that moment? The second thing is respect, the need to be seen. Many conflicts framed as disrespect arise from a fear of invisibility. Respect is not limited to manners or tone. It's recognition. It's the sense that your thoughts carry weight and your presence registers in your partner's inner world. When one partner says, "You never listen," the deeper message often sounds like, "I do not feel significant to you." Dismissiveness, interruptions, sarcasm, or emotional withdrawals all deliver the same painful signal: you are not important enough for my full attention. Ask yourself, honestly, when was the last time you felt genuinely seen rather than merely tolerated? Let's take a look at the third one, which is about time. Time is regarded as the currency of priority. Arguments about time are rarely about minutes, calendars, or schedules. Time communicates priority. When someone says, "You're always busy," what they may be expressing is, "I am no longer chosen." In contemporary relationships, productivity often expands while emotional availability contracts. Partners may share space but drift psychologically, coexisting without connection. Do you truly spend time together, or do you simply occupy the same environment? This distinction matters more than you may realize. And the fourth one is affection. It's called the silent measurement of love. Affection is not confined to physical touch. It includes tone, warmth, curiosity, responsiveness, and emotional presence. When affection diminishes, people rarely announce it plainly. Instead, they criticize behavior, withdraw intimacy, or provoke conflict, unconsciously seeking reassurance that love still exists. A complaint about coldness often masks a fear of rejection. Ask yourself gently, how do you give and receive affection? And has that language shifted over time? Small arguments endure because they carry large emotional truth. When you learn to listen beneath the words, conflict becomes information rather than threats. So if you're just joining me, this is Love Language. My name is Abdul-Ghaffar Arikiuyo. Thank you for holding on with me today. And we are taking a look at what we call communication breakdown. Why we argue about small little things that ought not to cause any confusion, any distraction, any commotion in our marriages, our relationships, our partnerships. They begin to carry so much weight and they affect the stability and the purpose of our relationship. I've just spoken to you about 4 interesting things that causes some form of disagreement, miscommunication in our relationships. And now let's move on to some very hard questions that require soft answers. So here's today's difficult question, and it deserves to be met with clarity rather than cruelty. Ask yourself, how do you know whether you are staying out of love or out of fear of being alone? This question unsettles because it strips away from confronting narratives. It asks you to look beyond habit, history, and hope, and to examine the emotional reality of your daily life. Love expands you, loneliness shrinks you. In love, disagreement does not disappear, but it remains reappearable. Conflict may feel uncomfortable, yet it carries the possibility of understanding and repair. Even during tension, there is a sense of emotional holding, an underlying belief that you are on the same side even when you disagree. Loneliness functions differently. Arguments repeat without resolution. The same conversation resurfaces, not because they are unresolved intellectually, but because they are unresolved emotionally. You may experience long periods of calm, yet feel unseen, disconnected, or quietly irrelevant even when nothing is wrong. Fear-based staying often disguises itself as reason. It sounds measured, sensible, even mature. It's not that bad. Every relationship goes through this. I don't want to start over. These statements are not inherently false. Many relationships do struggle. Starting again can be daunting. But when these thoughts dominate, they often signal endurance rather than choice. They reflect a strategy for avoiding loss, not a desire for connection. Love-based staying carries a different tone. It speaks in the language of movement and possibility. We are growing even when it is hard. We can repair when we cause harm. I feel emotionally safe being vulnerable here. The distinction does not lie in passion, intensity, or how much history you share. It lies in emotional nourishment. After interactions with your partner, do you feel more reassured, resourced, or more depleted? Do you feel steadier in yourself or smaller and more uncertain? Ask yourself this question without defensiveness or self-blame. Does this relationship restore you, or does it quietly drain you? The answer may not be immediate, but if you listen carefully to your emotional life, you will begin to feel itself. So let's close softly with an intention. Not with answers that rushed you forward, but with questions that invite you inward. Here is your affirmation. Say to yourself, I deserve connection, not merely companionship. I deserve to feel emotionally met, not simply accommodated. Hold that affirmation carefully. It is not a demand placed on another person. It is a recognition of your own worth and your legitimate emotional needs. Here is your reflective statement. Small arguments are rarely small. They are signals. They point towards unspoken longings, unmet needs, and moments where emotional contract has thinned. When you treat every recurring conflict as a problem to be solved, you miss what it's trying to tell you. When you treat it as an information, you begin to listen differently. Conflict is not always a sign of failure. Often, it's an invitation, an imperfect attempt to restore connection when direct language feels too vulnerable or too risky. So here is what you need to change for the week. Choose one conflict that returns again and again. Not the most dramatic one, but the most familiar. This week, resist the urge to argue it. Do not prepare your counterpoints. Instead, pause and ask yourself one question beneath the surface of that conflict. What do I need that I have not clearly expressed? Sit with the answer before you speak it. Let it mature. Then if you choose to share it, do so with care rather than accusation, with openness rather than urgency. And remember this, love does not automatically dissolve loneliness. Proximity does not guarantee connection. Commitment alone does not ensure emotional safety. Love requires sustained attention and the courage to be honest and the willingness to remain emotionally present even when discomfort arises. So ask yourself gently, but directly, are you willing to offer that kind of presence to your partner and just as importantly to yourself? That's it on the show for today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have gotten a couple of things that you need to put together to make your marriage, your relationship, or your partnership work for better. Communication breakdown is a very significant issue in our relationships, and these are why we argue about small little things in our relationship. Till next time, thank you for listening. Stay blessed and be good.
Love Language. Conversations about love that ask more of you.